What's going on, everyone? Ains here, Season Gaming, and today we're going to be talking about Xbox. So it's been a little while since I focused in on Xbox, but with their latest financial results out and Phil doing multiple interviews talking about Game Pass, content and services, mobile, cloud gaming, etc., I figured it was a good time to kind of circle back and see where things stood and give some commentary on what's going on behind the scenes as much as I can anyway. So today I'm going to go a little off script rather than just kind of reading an article per se, like I've done in some of the things of the past that I've written previously. I'm going to have this be a little more conversational. Hope you enjoy it, and let's go ahead and dive in. So the big thing came out last week where Axios was reporting, based on some of the Microsoft statistics in the fiscal reporting, that Xbox and Microsoft's target for Game Pass year-over-year growth was 73%. And they only hit 28%, thus missing their target and costing executives some bonus pay, including one comment that Nadella lost out on a $37 million bonus, which is just wild to comprehend. But forget the number for a second. What I really want to focus on is the fact that there are bonuses that large attached to Game Pass success and therefore Xbox's success. And I think that in and of itself tells us how much they are banking on this service for the growth of their gaming segment. Now, what's interesting about that, right, is that we've seen Game Pass grow kind of exponentially over the past few years, and we've reported out on that plenty, but it's kind of hit a wall. And Phil commented on this, at least on the console side, that a couple things. One, he believes that that number could begin to settle and that eventually everyone who is subbed to Game Pass is subbed and there's no other kind of market to attack there. The other thing he mentioned is that Game Pass is currently about 15% of Xbox's content and services revenue. And if you follow the reporting I do on the fiscal results as they typically come out, you'll know that Xbox's content and services revenue is the bulk of their revenue every quarter. And so what he said is that while the content and services revenue should continue to grow, obviously they want to continue growing Xbox as a whole, the 15% will be larger amount of revenue and a larger dollar amount, but the percentage itself will likely remain similar. He did caveat that PC has seen incredible growth on Game Pass, 159% year over year compared to the 28% on console. But again, I think there's reasons for that, which I will touch on slightly. But finishing up on the fiscal results, the hardware revenue was up 13% year over year, and overall revenue was $3.61 billion, just slightly ahead of $3.59 last year, but still representing their best final quarter ever in terms of fiscal year for Xbox. So generally good news, but it's the Game Pass conversation that got quite a lot of press, because I think Game Pass has been such a focus and there's been so much positivity around it over the past few years that when we hear something negative or we hear that it's missing a target, pretty substantially, I might add, that questions start to be raised. And so I think the heart of the problem here is, or I won't even say problem, but the heart of what caused this is partially obvious, but I think it leads to a conversation, which is content. Content is king. And what we saw over the past couple of years as Game Pass continued to grow is we saw an increase in third-party partnerships, things like MLB The Show coming day and date, Outriders launching on the service. We saw a great kind of second half from Xbox last year with Flight Simulator, Psychonauts 2, Forza Horizon 5, obviously Halo Infinite. And those types of things will obviously drive users to a service, right, or to a platform as a whole. Now, looking at this year, the conversation around Xbox has been rather flat, right? 2022, they have not delivered a lot of first party, and the things that were supposed to be delivered, including Redfall, Starfield in particular, have been delayed. And I think that really provides the insight to the crux of the issue, which is content is king. You're talking about a monthly subscription service. How do you maintain subscribers to that service if you don't have content? It's the heart of many conversations, but I think when you do the age-old comparison here to Game Pass, which is Netflix and or Disney Plus, whatever have you, in terms of movies and music, the key is that those services have developed a cadence of content delivery that is much easier, I think, to sustain than something like a gaming service. And the reason is that gaming development is volatile, right? We see it all the time. We talk about game delays constantly, and we know that major games, especially big budget AAA releases, can take years to several years to develop fully. And so I think when you are banking on something as big as a Starfield, a game that has been development in, overall probably for several years now, and you're banking on that being the kind of pillar of your subscribers moving into the service or your subscription service, kind of buoying that in the fall, and that moves out of the fall for a several month delay, then you've got this huge gap. And I think that's going to be an ongoing problem. It is why Xbox has banked so heavily on first party studios. They've grown that portfolio. And I think that the Activision and Blizzard deal comes into play here, which I'll touch on shortly. But it goes to show that the subscription model in the gaming environment is going to be harder or more difficult to kind of maintain than I think movies and music will. Because really, you're talking about having to plan out months, if not years in advance of what your content slate looks like. And with gaming development constantly in flux and major delays possible, even up until, the month of release, that's going to make it very challenging. Now, what some people would argue, and we've talked about this on Big Cast and other shows as well, is, well, you can kind of supplement that using third-party deals. And while that's absolutely true, and I think Xbox will, has done that and will continue to do that, it's not something that you can do immediately or in a kind of in case of emergency where you can just kind of reach out to someone and say, hey, you've got a big game launching, throw it on Game Pass right now. It doesn't work that way. There are contractual obligations that take months and months and months to likely kind of finalize there, and those have to be planned well in advance. So the issue becomes, I have to imagine the issue becomes that you can't just, if you're banking on major first-party releases, you don't want to spend a ton of money on major third-party deals because then you've got a lot of output going out that may all land at the same time and not drive the input that you want. But at the same time, if you back away from those third-party deals, you assume that your first-party releases are going to happen. They don't. Then it's too late to get the third parties in, and now you don't have the output for your service to draw people in. So I can only imagine it's a very complicated equation. It's something that's constantly probably talked about with the Game Pass team and leadership and how they manage those agreements. But I foresee this being an ongoing issue until Xbox becomes big enough from a first-party perspective where they can release a major release every month or every quarter, at least from a AAA perspective, to keep things interesting. And I think that that's where the Activision Blizzard deal becomes even more interesting, is because, we've talked about that ad nauseum now, especially on Bigcast. So you can listen to us there if you want more detail about the deal. But I think that that is holding up potentially other things that Xbox could be doing right now to kind of help their first party development and Game Pass portfolio. So this is going to be an ongoing, thing that I think we kind of analyze into 2023, 2024, because what we're looking at right now is we're looking at a very strong 2023 for Xbox, potentially with Forza Motorsport, Redfall, Starfield, obviously many other games, probably some we don't know of, right? There's Hellblade 2 on deck. There's a lot of other games in development we've talked about, but we've also been saying that for a long time. Right. We have been on the Xbox side saying just wait. And I think it's fair to say just wait because we're expecting these big AAA experiences. But now, you can only wait so long, which is kind of counter to AAA development. It kind of happens as it happens. And if you want a AAA kind of masterpiece to land or something that is really going to drive subscribers to a service, those things take time and you can't rush them. So as I said, this is a complicated issue. I think it's going to be one that Xbox leadership kind of not struggles with, but deals with for time to come into the future. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun from a gaming perspective to just watch it unfold. I want to be clear that from a Game Pass perspective, I love Game Pass. I still think it's the best value in gaming for me. If you are someone who enjoys a lot of varied experiences and trying out new things, it's just simply fantastic. However, there is a kind of, part of the market, I would say, plenty of users that are not that way. They don't want to play smaller indie games. They don't want to play or try all these different little things or even some of the experiences that come that may be a little different. There is that kind of mass market casual audience that wants the big AAA blockbusters, and that's what they like to enjoy. And if Game Pass isn't delivering those, then they have no incentive to subscribe to Game Pass. So it's an interesting problem. I love to look at things like this and just kind of look at it from a market perspective, but I think that Phil's comments around Game Pass potentially hitting a wall are going to be interesting. I don't know. I was surprised to hear him say that, and far be it from me to question Phil on what he knows about Xbox. That would be ridiculous. But I do believe that they'll continue to see some growth once that cadence hits, once the Starfields hit, once the Hellblade 2s hit, the Forzas, etc., where you're starting to get those AAA releases that kind of reach broad audiences. I think you will start to see that number go up again. And, I'm excited to see what happens there. I think the only other thing I wanted to touch on this video was really around his comments around on iJustine's channel around what Xbox is building towards. So he did reiterate that they are all in on gaming. They're looking at new hardware. We know that the whole Xbox streaming stick, for lack of a better name, is planned and coming. They're looking at new styles of games and partnerships and a focus on mobile, and they believe that Activision and King can help there, which obviously I've written about and we've talked about before as well. The fact that they're building an Xbox storefront for mobile is going to be very interesting to watch, especially when you talk about the iOS and Android kind of storefronts and the regulations around that. And, that's going to be something that's going to be really interesting. But Phil made sure to kind of articulate that they're playing the long game there, which is smart, obviously. So I really like that. I really like Game Pass and what it's driving towards. We've seen some kind of, holes in the armor, if you will, around the conversation around it. And but I think it's really due to some of the volatility, like I said, around game development. And as we see Xbox start to tackle that in the coming months and years, it's going to be interesting to watch if the conversation changes and if we start to see some of this growth again. So if they hit 28% growth rate this year in a year that's been mostly dry, at least in 2022 calendar year, we'll have to see what their target is for next year, but I'm very interested to see what their growth is next year. And we'll definitely revisit this conversation once we get through a bulk of next year with some major releases coming out. So for now, I think pay attention to the Xbox Game Awards next month, Xbox Game Awards. Sorry, I told you I'm doing this off the cuff. So the Video Game Awards in December, I fully expect Xbox will have some surprises there, some major announcements. And of course, there's some releases this week, including Pentiment, I will give a shout out for, that I'm very excited for, from Obsidian, coming this month as well. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and head out. We'll talk more about this on Bigcast as always. If you enjoy gaming chatter with me, Hogue, Travis, and Dan, we are live every Sunday morning where we talk about things like this in more detail. So would love for you to join us. Otherwise, thank you as always for supporting Season Gaming. Truly appreciate it. And we will talk to you next time. Until then.